if you put God in the relationship, so it's you and your honey and God, that is going to be the only lasting secret to a relationship.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ignite.
Today we have a very special guest attending all the way from my hometown, Berrien Springs, Michigan.
That's right. Today we have longtime pastor of Pioneer Memorial Church at our sister Adventist college, Andrews University.
Woo! Yeah, no, we are so excited to talk to the very own Pastor Dwight and hear a little bit about his story and also advice that he has for our students pursuing a relationship with Christ.
And with that, let's get into the episode. Pastor Dwight, thank you so much for joining us today on Ignite, and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my treat.
Yes.
It's our treat. And we have so many questions, so we'll just jump right on into it. And our first question, so some background.
Mm-hmm.
You were a missionary to parents in Japan, and you
Correct.
attended a high school in Singapore's Far Eastern Academy. So Matthew and I, and I'm sure people watching and listening are curious, how was the transition of growing up outside of America to the culture of the States?
Let me just first say to you guys, it's a treat to be able to sit in this set with you because both of you have been up in our neck of the woods. We call it the Midwest up there.
Yeah.
But here you are in the middle of life at Southern. And
Michigan born.
Yeah. I'm proud
Born
of
and
you both.
raised, or I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Born.
So I'm proud of you both. So yeah, I was born in
thank you.
Japan. 私はね、東京で生まれたんだよ。だから14年ぐらい日本で住みました。
Fluent.
I was
Wow.
born in Tokyo and lived there for 14 years. And then my folks sent me off to academy, and that would be in Singapore, Far Eastern Academy.
Yeah.
So the question was, what about Singapore?
How was the transition from the culture that you were experiencing
From
to the
Singapore
culture
to
yeah,
here?
of the States?
Oh, it's completely different. I mean, you don't want
I
to
can
go into
imagine.
all the details. But I had a cousin here, and it was back then it was Southern Missionary College, SMC. And we'll eventually get to the Southern Matrimonial College part. But
That's the part I was told about coming here.
But I had a cousin who was going to school here. So I come over, this missionary's kid, and there was a cultural shifting that you just had to make. I didn't come from Japan. My folks had moved to Guam, and so it's kind of an Americanized island in the Pacific. But culture-wise, when I came, I was about 5 years behind, if you know what culture, you know what I'm talking about. Back, you remember Happy Days? There was a television program called Happy Days. They all wore white socks. When I went to academy, we all wore white socks. But when I came here, my cousin said, "Hey Dwight, let me just tell you something. We don't wear white socks at Southern." So I
What
had
like
to-
a culture
so
shock.
what, yeah, it was. I was totally into a new world and loved it here. But you know, new kids who come here from overseas, they bring their culture with them and have to adjust to what's here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I loved being at Southern, and here I am 50 years later, back on the same campus.
Well, thank you for coming back.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. So, since you were born to missionaries, you're pretty quickly surrounded by our faith. When did that faith become yours and not your parents' faith?
Oh, man, how much time do we have, Matthew?
That's up to you.
Come on. No, it's true. When you're born into an Adventist home, there's just kind of this legacy, kind of a legacy faith. My parents are Adventists. And in my case, I was a fifth-generation Adventist.
Wow.
Okay? And when I decided to go into ministry, I became a fourth-generation preacher. So I've grown up in a home that's just, you know, kind of like rock solid, sold out on the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But the hazard of that, the drawback is, you can lean on mom and dad, and I happen to know your folks well. Both of your folks well, okay? So when you were kids growing up, the assumption is you're going to be just like mom and dad. At some point you make the transition. I wish, okay, I'm going to say this, I wish I had met Jesus here. That's not a diss on the school, because I had great professors, great deans, great RAs, great weeks of prayer. You don't know the name Maury Vanden, but that was a well-known name when I was a kid growing up. And he came here and did a week of prayer, and I thought, oh man, this is something. But it's just, I was too immature, and it didn't connect. not because people weren't trying, it's just I wasn't hearing it. And if I could live it over, and if I were talking to all the first-year kids, because you got a lot of first-year students this year,
Yeah.
right?
Most
We have
ever.
like the biggest class.
That's what I heard. So if I were talking to all of them, 758, they said last night at the
something like
alumni
that.
banquet kickoff, I'd say to them, hey guys, don't wait. Get to know Jesus just right off the bat. Now, if you came from a Jesus home, that's great. You already have the background. If you didn't come from a Jesus home, you're going to meet him here. And there are people here who will walk you and talk you down that path. But don't put off, well, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it when I'm an upperclassman, or I'm going to do it when I get to graduate school. If I could do it over, that's what I would want. Because you start then with a solid base, and we'll talk about what that means.
Yeah.
But for me, the transition wasn't here. So I grew up in the home that I've already described to you, missionaries kid, PK, MK, and it took moving on and having to start maturing for God to really get my attention and say, boy, we got some work to do.
So you studied theology. So you still had kind of a direction in your mind of
Right.
wanting to be a pastor.
Yes.
But it still hadn't clicked necessarily for you yet of
No.
the head knowledge to like the heart change of that
Correct.
personal relationship with God.
Right.
So when did you come into wanting to become a pastor? Like when was that kind of an option for
And
you?
was that always the case?
No, Gianna and Matthew, no. I grew up wanting to be a doctor, a physician. I wanted to be a surgeon. And my mom would give me all these human body models where you put them together, the see-through human man, human woman.
She was dedicated to this
She
dream.
was dedicated to the dream. And there's nothing wrong with it. She was just encouraging me in the area of my kind of desire. But by the time I got to, and something happened to me in academy that just dramatically changed that. And God spoke to me through that happening and said, no, you're going into theology. And I was just, what? So when I came here, I registered as back then it was religion major, theology minor, and I took a history minor, okay? My sophomore year, since you asked, I'm thinking, man, I don't know about this being a preacher business. I grew up in it, of course. I'd like to go into law. I want to go into law. But I just was not certain yet. And my folks were, over in Guam, so that's thousands of miles away. I couldn't pick up the phone and say, hey, Mom and Dad, let's just talk about this. There was no phone calling back then. I mean, you're paying astronomical phone bills in the day. In fact, when I came here to Southern, they had just invented electricity. And so,
Wow.
no, I'm just kidding.
I didn't think so. I didn't think that lined
I was
up.
like, you're putting this into perspective for me. That's just so bizarre to hear.
Yeah, it is bizarre, isn't it? But no. It just wasn't
You
easy
had
to
me
be in.
with that
I got you. I said, well, really? Well, that's something.
I was like, that's a lot.
Like, hold up. That's 1800.
That's 1800.
Anyway, I needed to talk to somebody, and I just didn't. So it's the semester, we were on semester. Are you still on semesters here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because when I went to Anders, then it was quarter. But semesters had just ended, Christmas break, went to my grandparents' place, and I come back, and I'm in my room in Towage Hall, 362 Towage Hall. That's my room, right up there at the top, overlooking Jacob's Ladder. Do they still call it Jacob's Ladder?
They do.
I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was just telling Karen yesterday, I said, I don't know if I said a prayer or what, but I just felt like God is going to have to show me something. And I didn't know what it would be. And I looked up on the shelf, and my mother had given me a book when I went away to school here at Southern. And the book title would mean nothing to you. Carlisle B. Haynes was a well-known preacher at the time. And Carlisle B. Haynes speaks to young ministers. And so I just I don't know why, it's just like my hand went up and I pulled it down and I had the book, Speaks to Young Ministers. And Gianna and Matthew, it's what the Holy Spirit used. And I said, oh man, I can't go into law. That's not where God's been going in my life. I wish I could tell you that I suddenly got my life all together. I didn't.
All the pieces just.
But it became clear. No, stay with theology major. Yeah. So that was the story.
Wow.
So you did just mention Karen, of
did.
course. And
love
did you meet her
Karen.
here?
Southern Matrimonial College, did I tell you?
Oh, yeah.
SMC.
Okay, I want to hear about this.
Yeah,
Tell me about your guys'
well,
story.
Okay, I'll be happy
And
to
can I
tell
just say, I think your wife is one of the most incredible women I've ever met.
She's a
just such a
sweetheart.
firecracker.
Yeah, she
With
is.
so much personality.
She's
I
got
love
it,
her. And
yeah.
so funny.
Yeah,
So funny.
She is. And she's beautiful too.
She is.
Yeah.
She is that.
And we've been married 49 years since you asked.
Wow.
But we met, actually, we finally connected because I'd seen her around. She was the receptionist in Wright Hall. I mean, everybody that walks through that door, she's saying, you know, in a Southern accent, because she was a Southern belle from Atlanta. And she'd say, hello, and nice to have you. And she was just trained to do that. I'd walk in, my girlfriend was working in the office right behind her. So I said, no, I'm not talking to this girl at the front desk. Well, Karen now says, I walk all the way around the desk and go to the back. But I began to notice her my junior year. She's a sophomore nursing major. And she was there at McKee Library. We went yesterday. I won't bore you with the picture which I have in my camera, but we took our pictures there because she would be she was at the top of those stairs. And you know, McKee has this kind of weird turning stairway that goes up to the top floor, quiet zone. I was in the quiet zone. They didn't call it quiet zone back then. And she's sitting at this little table, one student table that they would have a series of those by the banister. And anyway, I'd see her. And she was this particular evening, she's sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I got to meet this girl in a more serious way, not just chit chat. So anyway, long story made longer. I said I got to think of a way to get her attention. So I went over and I was working on my Greek, and I went over and I plopped my Greek paper down in front of her. I said, you know, I'm really having a hard time with this. Can you help me with this? There's a lot of Greek scribbling on there. And she looked at me, she said, you know what, if I helped you, you wouldn't learn it, so no, I'm not going to help you. So that just started right there, and we got the conversation going. And
So you asked a nursing major to help you with your Greek homework.
exactly, just hoping that would open the door. Yeah, real smooth, real brilliant. But anyway, that opened the door, and our friendship began, and we were both 19.
Wow.
Fell in love at 19 at Southern Missionary College.
Southern Missionary / Matrimonial College.
Exactly. And the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah. Broke up a few times along the way,
But you're together now.
Not that we're counting, but how many times?
it was only once.
Oh, just once.
Yeah, just once. And I tell kids, look, because you know up at Andrews, I've been there for 40 years pastoring that church, and they're young adults just like you are here, and they're dealing with romance and dealing with relationships and what do we do and how do we keep it going. And I say, hey, you know, it can work and it can suddenly quit working. And you just have to be attentive to, you know, where God is leading you. Protect your friendship. Don't have lab assignments in your dating relationship. You know what I mean when I say that. You don't. But anyway, you just keep things on the upper level. Lab assignments would mean having, you know, physical relationships. Yeah,
I figured it out.
Now,
slowly.
yeah.
Matthew, I
It
could
was
see the
clicking.
wheels turning. Oh, I see what you mean.
So you and your wife, Karen, you guys have been married for 50 years, which
49.
is 49, almost 50 years.
50 next June.
Which is a huge milestone.
Yeah.
And so we just have to ask, what do you think is the secret to keeping a healthy and long-lasting and just abundant relationship that's also Christ-centered?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is simple. I tell kids when I'm sitting down with them, they're thinking about getting married or what have you. I say, listen, here's God's arithmetic. 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. If you put God in the relationship, so it's you and your honey and God, that is going to be the only lasting secret to a relationship. There are all kinds of relationships. You go to Hollywood, there are relationships everywhere. They're on YouTube, all over. But they're not relationships that are going to last forever. And if you're talking about you want a forever friendship, and you're making this commitment to each other and to Christ, to Jesus, just get him in early on. So that you're sitting down in the cafeteria. A lot of our first dates were just going to the cafeteria. And it wasn't the cafeteria you have now, it was the old tabernacle.
Right.
And man, it was something else. But anyway, we'd sit down and we just pray together. Okay, let's pray together. All right. What you're doing is you're developing a comfort level with spiritual activity. Prayers prayer is prayer. But when you begin to do it together, then that does something to your hearts as well, because it pulls your hearts toward Jesus. But as you move toward the center, like spokes on a bicycle wheel, as they move to the center, they get closer to each other until you're right there at the center, and then you're as close as you can get. And so we'd go to, Vespers, Friday night, and then they would have something on, I forget what the Saturday night Vespers was called, like Even Song or something like that.
Even Song.
Okay. But we go, make a date out of it, walk there, walk back. I didn't get a car till my junior year, 61 Volkswagen. I'll tell you that story someday. But you just start building that in. Just start building it in. Go to church together. Come on.
Make it the mold.
Yeah, make it the norm. This is what we do. This is our mold. This is our friendship, and this is how we keep Jesus in the center. And nobody's embarrassed about it. And if you're with friends that don't do that, that's okay. Hey, this is what we do. And we're going to pray right here, because we're all sitting down in the cafeteria together. We're going to pray. You guys okay with that? Yeah. And then you have the prayer. And, you just assume that people are going to understand that this is how you're growing your friendship, but in the process, you're reaching out and drawing others into a comfort level that they were not in before as well. So I just tell kids, look, start off, just get Jesus in. 1 + 1 + 1 at the beginning. You may not get married, but still do it this way, because you protect yourself as well. You're not going to be just kind of like checking the whole world out.
Right.
Yeah, no, we're developing a relationship, and you put Jesus in the center. You'll know one way. Doesn't mean it's all going to work. You may work so well that you realize you're not meant for each other. Oh, but that worked, right? Dating is not to just become pre-husband and wife. Dating is to find out, how's it working? Are we growing in something here? And is Jesus a part of the growing? So anyway.
And that's huge too, just to comment on what you said, because I think a lot of people go into relationships with like the prior expectation of, this is just going to be my person. So they put so much on the other person to fulfill them and to be so much for them, and it's like
too heavy. It's too heavy.
It's too much.
That girl is just weighted down. And the reputation for theology majors is, man, you play the piano? Good. Let's start dating. That kind of craziness. But it just puts the heavier and heavier, and boy, you're adding too much to it.
It puts like a standard on somebody that they can't actually fulfill.
Good. Yeah.
But to grow together towards Jesus is where you can find that healthy balance.
Yeah. So when I say at the beginning, man, if you're a first-year student here, get to grow in a friendship with Jesus. That means, hey, as you're going that, all your other relationships will then be impacted by the friendship that you're growing with Him.
What an amazing conversation with Pastor Dwight. I wish that we could fit all of the conversation topics that we had in one episode, but unfortunately we couldn't.
But that means that we have a part 2. So guys, please be sure to tune into part 2 that we'll be having on soon.
So be sure to check for updates on our Instagram at IgniteSAU and our YouTube channel, the School of Journalism and Communication.
Bye.